want to promote your business? Do you want to talk about your nonprofit organization? Do you want to talk about your culture? Introducing the online web TV, Afrique Today, Fogham, where you can watch us live at the same time on 4 platforms: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and using the Afrique Today app. Download our app today for Android or Apple. Promote your business today. For more information, go to www.afriquetoday.com. Afrique Today, the best of digital TV. ESYDA returned to play summer clinics. Recreation, Tuesday and Thursday, 6 to 8 p.m. Travel team, EDP, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday. Time, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Free mask and water bottle. Register today at esYDA.org. Email info@ESYDA. Phone 248-765-9369. Office 301-800-7848. Toll free 800-995-5532. Free registration for all summer clinics. All new players need buy uniforms. We're following COVID-19 soccer guidelines. Small group practice with 9 players and 1 coach. For more information, go to ESYDA.org.
Looking to start a rewarding career? Call Gandhi Healthcare today to earn your certification as a nursing assistant, dental assistant, pharmacy technician, phlebotomy technician, and many more. We offer no interest payment plans, scholarships, and tuition reimbursements for those that qualify. Located right in the heart of Pikesville on Reisterstown Road and McHenry Avenue in the Pikesville Shopping Center. It offers immediate access from 695, accessible to public transportation on the 83 and 89 bus lines. We offer morning, evening, and weekend classes to fit your schedule. Earn your certification in as little as 5 weeks. We are now offering classes online and on-site. Hurry, classes start soon, so enroll today. Visit us online at gandhihealthcare.com or call 443-352-8030.
We're inviting you to watch a special program that will be broadcasted on Afrique Today, the digital Pan-African television of choice of the diaspora. Is based here in Washington, D.C. in the United States of America. That special program will be on coronavirus, COVID-19, that vicious pandemic that is killing hundreds and thousands of people, messing up their lives all around the world, millions of people. We'll be talking about that. What is going on in Cameroon, especially in those rural areas where people have limited means. People are dying. What about the mask? What about chloroquine? What about all the medication, the traditional medication? What about the vaccine? We'll be talking about all that. And to talk about that, we have put together a panel of international experts. They're going to be calling from Japan, from China, from Europe, and from Cameroon. That program is sponsored by the Pacha Foundation. And to watch that program, you will be able to connect on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, and on the website of Afrique Today, www.afriquetoday.com. Next Saturday, July the 11th, 3 p.m. Washington DC time. It will be 8 p.m. in Yaoundé, Central Africa. We will be there. I am Dr. Semyon Dogmo. I will be the moderator. You will learn a lot. See you there. Afrique Today.
Do you want to promote your business? Do you want to talk about your nonprofit organization? Do you want to talk about your culture? Introducing the online web TV, Afrique Today, Fogham, where you can watch us live at the same time on 4 platforms: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and using the Afrique Today app. Download our app today for Android or Apple. Promote your business today. For more information, go to www.afriquetoday.com. Afrique Today, the best of digital TV.
Welcome to American Africans United, and I want to thank you for joining us again. But before I start, I want to first thank all those who had joined us last week and our audience for tuning in. And I want to, and I don't, if you've emailed me, I'm still getting around to it. I want to thank you for coming on. We had so many people email last week, so I'm still getting around to all those emails. And if you have any questions and comments today, you'll see the number and you can email me again. But I want to thank you for all coming on today. We have a wonderful, wonderful show for you today. And we have two unbelievable guests. Our topic for today is going to be Black Man with a Gun. So I am really, really excited. We're going to be having David Timmis as one of our guests, and also Sergeant Joseph, a.k.a. Sergeant Joe, who is a U.S. Marine veteran and also a firearms instructor. So before I introduce my panelists and have them introduce themselves, I want to turn over to my co-host, the Invisible Man, who's going to read you a little poem. And maybe some of you know it out there. My co-host, can you hear me? Brother Z, can you hear me? I'm not sure if we've lost him or not. So we'll come back to that.
Okay.
Now we can hear you. Now we can hear you.
Okay. All right. When Dr. Butler, well, first I want to say thank you to Afrique Today for giving us the opportunity to come to you. And when Dr. Butler mentioned a black man with a gun, the first thing I thought about was a poem I had read years ago. And it's a poem called Old Limb. And the author is Sterling Allen Brown. He was born May the 1st, 1901. He died January 13th, 1989. He was a black professor, folklorist, poet, literary critic, and the first poet laureate of the District of Columbia. So naturally, he worked at Howard most of his career. He was also a visiting professor at several other notable institutions, Vassar College, New York University, Atlanta University, and Yale. And here is Old Limb. I talked to Old Limb, and Old Limb said, "They weigh the cotton, they store the corn. We only good enough to work the roads. They run the commissary, they keep the books. We gotta be grateful for being cheated. Whippersnapper clerks call us out of our name. We got to say Mr. to Penland boys. They make our figures turn somersets, we buck in the middle. Say, thank you, sir. They don't come by ones, they don't come by twos, but they come by tens. They got the judges, they got the laws. They got the jury rolls, they got the law. They don't come by one, they got the sheriffs, they got the deputies. They don't come by twos. They got the shotguns, they got the ropes. We get the justice. In the end, they all come by tens. Their fists stay closed, their eyes look straight. Our hands stay open, our eyes must fall. They don't come by ones. They got the manhood, they got the courage. They don't come by twos. We got to slink around, hang tail hands. They burn us when we dogs. They burn us when we men. They come by tens. I had a buddy, 6 foot of man, muscled up perfect, game to the heart. They don't come by ones. outworked and outfought any man or two men. They don't come by twos. He spoke out of turn at the commissary. They gave him a day to get out of the county. He didn't take it. He said, come and get me. They came and got him, and they came by the tens. He stayed in the county. He lays there dead. They don't come by ones. They don't come by twos, but they come by tens. Sterling Allen Brown, Old Lynn. Thank you.
On mute.
And so I would like for you to really set the stage for today's conversation as far as black men, a black man with a gun. Can we have the slide presentation, please? And I just want to give you a little background history, a video history of black men with a gun. We've been in every war. We've been in with a gun. We've had guns with us all the time. And so here's just a few pictures I want you to think about. And before we start discussion, ponder about, now do we see the same climate of black men with a gun? Thank you so much, Pierre. So without further ado, I want to introduce my guest again, and I want them to say a few things about themselves and tell you a little bit about what position they might have, and we'll start. And remember, the lines open up at 7:15. For those of you who want to call in, please remember to look at the number on your screen. You'll also see my email if you want to email me, but please, we'll start taking callers at 7:15. So if you want to call in, don't forget to call in to 571-612-0496. And I'm going to turn it over to and let David Timmis. Could you please bring our David Timmis on, introduce yourself? And I want to welcome you and thank my guest for being on this show today.
Hello.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Butler. Thank you very much. I tremendously appreciate the opportunity to speak on this issue, because I feel that this is an issue that is of importance, that is shown to be of importance now, is acted upon now, but it's always, in my opinion, been important. I'm a staunch advocate of African Americans, or Africans diaspora, however we should say it, of availing themselves of the Second Amendment. I feel that it is a right. I don't feel that it's a privilege. I don't feel that it's something that anybody else gives us. The history in the United States with guns, as far as the Africans are concerned, has not been marked by one of support. It's been one marked by just about, with everything else regarding our civil rights, of control. The very first gun control law in the colonies was passed, I believe, in 1641 in the then Commonwealth of Virginia, specifically keeping anyone from handing out guns or ammo or gunpowder to anyone that, in essence, wasn't white. And the penalty for violating that law was death. And I don't think that it's changed in any time. The capacity for our safety when we are armed is dramatically increased. One of the popular sayings was that you didn't see black people getting lynched if they were armed. As a matter of fact, Ida B. Wells had actually said that a Winchester rifle should have a prominent place in the home of African Americans. So our story with guns, I don't believe starts with the Civil War. I believe that it starts, as with everything else regarding Africans in this country, from the very beginnings of this country. And I don't think that it should be limited now for any reasons that aren't sound, such as those who may be mentally incapable of conducting themselves as responsible adults and things of that nature. But I yield the rest of my time to Sergeant Joe. Thank you very much for letting me introduce myself.
Thank you. Sergeant Joe.
Yes, ma'am. How are you doing today? I appreciate you guys having me on. I'm Sergeant Joe. I spent 9 years in the Marines, 4 combat tours. I'm also a fire instructor now here in Atlanta. And I'm, again, like Mr. Timmons said, fully behind Black people arming themselves, doing things properly, getting the licenses that are required, because we are, even not just now, but the history of our time being in America and even other countries around the world, where people are not armed, our Black people are not armed, and we are constantly oppressed and attacked and raped and murdered. So it is up to us to arm and educate ourselves and do things, obviously, legally. We have a history of seeing when Black people start doing right by the law, they want to change the laws, okay? So by getting your permits and getting the firearms that you need and training to protect yourself and your family, it forces them to look at laws from a Black and a white side instead of just a white side. And it is absolutely imperative for us to protect ourselves, to learn the rights and know this, so we're not out here being killed in the streets and we're not being taken advantage of.
Thank you. Question I had, and I want to find out, now, how do these, they make these laws, how do these laws actually affect us? And then I want Mr. Timmons to talk about the recent law that they've passed here about if you have a medical marijuana card. But how do some of these laws affect Black people that they've made? And why were these laws really made?
Well, the history with gun control in America, in my opinion, has always been one of disparate racial impact, whether it was intentional or whether it was just by net effect. The gun laws in the United States of America never affect farmers. They never affect rural people. The gun control laws, when you take a look at it, are always, and I do mean always, concentrated in the major metropolitan areas with large African populations. This has never not been the case. So I really do believe that these laws are not made to control guns, but to control people. There's a reason why the Second Amendment is considered part of the Bill of Rights. It is absolutely no different than our capacity to speak, our capacity to assemble, our capacity to believe in God, our capacity not to be forced to incriminate ourselves, and our capacity to have our property saved. As a matter of fact, somebody once said that the First Amendment is the guarantee, but the Second Amendment is the guarantor. And I stridently believe that. Now, here in Maryland, what happened was that when they passed the medicinal marijuana act, amongst other things, what they said was that if you obtained a medical marijuana card, that excluded you from being able to have what they call registered firearms. And registered firearms in Maryland are short-barreled, anything that falls under the National Firearms Act, which are short-barrel rifles, and also for handguns. I'm not sure if we are prohibited from having long guns, although I think you might be prohibited from obtaining any more after you have it. Now, once again, while I do think that law, of course, will disproportionately affect Africans, or people of the African diaspora, it is one of those, what I call a net effect law. That may not be a racially targeted law, but it's a racially affected law. And the reason that they gave behind it is that usually when people get their marijuana card, one of the most common reasons for getting it is for the treatment of anxiety. So they feel that if you have a mental illness to the level that you need to have this medication, that you should be excluded from owning firearms.
Sergeant, do you want to add anything on to that?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. What we've seen time and time again is all types of laws that are implemented are directed more so at urban populations, urban cities, whether it's Chicago or New York or Atlanta. They impose laws based off of the crime in these areas, but they fail to look at the underlying cause of the types of crimes in this area. If you look at all the city data for the highest gun violence and just general violence, it's always the cities that have the strictest gun laws. The cities that you can't get firearms in have the highest murder rate, have the highest robbery rate, have all of these things that are predicated upon people being able to defend themselves. These criminals know that if you live in this area, chances are you don't have a firearm. But if they knew that every single person had a firearm, these crimes would drop. And this has been proven across the country. This has been proven across the world. There's places where it's mandated that homes have these, and crime in those areas are significantly dropped. So when they impose these laws to take guns, or they say, hey, you can have A, but you can't have B, it's forcing you to give up a right. Okay? They're forcing us to give up our right to protect ourselves. It just shall not be infringed. It doesn't matter what your background is. It doesn't matter what your medical condition is. And I firmly believe that people who have mental illnesses and who have been to a doctor for a particular reason should be evaluated whether they have a firearm or not. But for someone who has anxiety, does that mean you can't have a firearm? Because as a veteran, several of us have anxieties. You know, there's societal things that happen in our history and in our communities growing up that make it rough for minority communities, things that we deal with, things that we see that give you anxiety. And based off of how we were raised in the areas that we were forced to grow up in due to society, now we're not able to protect ourselves. It just perpetuates the same problems that we've been going through.
You know, I just wanted to make a comment. It was very interesting because, as you know, a lot of Black people are fearful for guns. But I've always realized that the people who have guns, a lot of times in the Black community, they have them illegally. So they're gonna have guns anyway. And so restricting the average person from getting guns shouldn't be the case. And when they started that program, I remember, I don't know what year it started, but turn your guns in for money. They started around Christmas time one year, so people to go turn their guns in for money. Can you guys address that a little bit? Because that's when I start really thinking, why are they taking away weapons from people who legally had guns were running up there because they need a little money in their pocket, turn in their guns. But yet criminals who have guns are keeping their guns. So can you guys tell me, just address that point just a little bit? And started, Joey, would you start on it, please?
Yes, absolutely. The thing about that, if you actually read the way that they put that out, they specify that it doesn't matter where the firearm comes from. It doesn't matter who owns the firearm. If you turn it in, they'll pay you for it. So what that opens the door for is, one, theft. Because you have people who know where there's guns are. They want to break into vehicles and they steal them and go get $200, $300, $400 for it. And then you also have people who have illegal firearms, whether they've stolen them, purchased them on the street. Then they go and turn them in, right? So you have this thing where it's hey, you bring us guns, we'll give you money. There's no sort of check to say, hey, do you have a permit for this? Is this your firearm? So when I see that type of law, what it tells me is the law enforcement, they want to get these guns off of the street and out of the hands of criminals. However, like I said, the criminals aren't the ones going in and saying, hey, here's my guns. You know, they're not the ones turning those firearms in. It's the people who desperately need money. It's the people who are hooked on different types of drugs. It's the criminals breaking into vehicles, stealing guns. Most guns are stolen from vehicles. So when they open up these programs of turning your firearms, they're not necessarily targeting the people who legally own firearms. They're targeting people who are desperate, the people who need the money. And those programs are great in the sense of you may have someone who finds a firearm or knows of a location that there's a firearm that may have been, dumped in a ditch or whatever, and they turn those types of things in. But what we can't allow it to do is to target our inner cities where people are willingly giving up their rights to protect themselves in exchange for a few dollars.
Can I say something? The first buyback was in Baltimore in 1974, and they retrieved 13,500 guns. So you're right, the urban area.
Mr. Simmons, do you have anything to add on to that? Because, I was just...
You were just surprised about how many guns? Yes. And what happens, though, is that as subsequent years went by, both the amount of gun and the quality of gun that came in diminished significantly. The last gun buyback that they had in Baltimore, I think just a little more than half of the firearms were even operable.
Yeah.
So what happened was that people were just bringing in junk to hand it in.
You're right.
And when you then bring those, then when you ask for those guns to be brought back in, many times those guns could have been used in crimes. So you have now just destroyed one of the best physical pieces of evidence that you could ever have to clear out that crime. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that they shouldn't have done it because, you know, you have competing interests. Sometimes you say, well, maybe it might be better just to get the gun off the street and not clear the case for a case that you wasn't going to clear anyway. But it just, in my opinion, it just doesn't make any sense, especially considering the fact that the rate of gun violence, of illegal gun violence done by licensed owners is about the same as the amount of police that get convicted for bad police shoots. So it is a minuscule number, and they're targeting, in my opinion, the wrong audience for the wrong reasons. And they're making us use our tax money in order to entice us to give up one of the best means in order to equalize things out in case you are accosted by a criminal.
Now, I'll just say, when I put this topic out there to talk about this today, someone sent me an email, said, you know, more guns on the street mean more gang violence. And I said, gang violence? I said, and I just left it alone. I said, just listen. I'll have wonderful individuals on who can talk about, you know, the relationship, the correlation to guns and gang violence. Can one of you talk a little about that? Because I was just dumbfounded when they said more guns on the street causes more gang violence.
Well, no, it doesn't. Gangs are gangs, guns are guns. One's not the other. It's not as if there isn't significant gang violence in countries where there may not be a large ownership of firearms. You know, it's not like it diminished gang violence over in England, over in London, for example, where even as of right now, it's still more likely you'd be a victim of crime in the city of London than you would in the city of New York. So it doesn't, I don't think that it stops it at all. I can understand why people believe that, because people are taught to think that if you have a firearm, you're more likely to be violent. But there is absolutely no data that supports that. We have, you know, America's a violent country, period. But one of the reasons why is that in America, we actually care about most life, and we're actually encouraged to report crimes, minor or major, where in many countries they aren't. So while I do understand that, I believe that it is not the violence that causes the gang, it is the gang that causes the violence. So therefore, if you want to reduce the violence, you should reduce the gang activity.
And Sergeant Joe, would you like to add anything on to that? Because you know, that's and it makes other Black folks fearful. Can you hear me okay? Okay, wonderful. And it actually, and we have Black folks fearful to have a gun, to hold a gun. And so just, can you talk a little bit about that? And how do we reduce the fear for Black gun ownership?
The biggest thing that, and this is anything in life, is people are scared of what they don't understand. You have police who come into areas and they do certain things because they're not used to dealing with that populace. They're scared of being there. Children are scared of certain things. It's the fear of unknowing. When it comes to firearms, most people typically grow up where they're seeing the negative side of it. They see someone's been shot, a child has been killed. They see all the negative imagery. So that's what plays the biggest part of their fear. When I have several students who come to me who've never fired a gun before in their life. Once I get them to understand that they are in control, it takes away a lot of that fear. And you imagine, I'm sure some of you out there have kids, you know, when you first teach your children how to drive, you're in the passenger seat. That kid is driving and you are terrified. You're not in control. Yeah. But when you get in the driver's seat and you're driving, you're relaxed. It's the same thing when it comes to firearms. We're great when you're in control of that firearm. When someone else is in control of that, that's where the fear comes from. There's a large lack of education when it comes to our community. There's a large lack of training that comes in that community. So when you increase awareness, you increase training, those fears subside and people begin to understand a firearm is a tool. Whether you're a hunter, you're protecting yourself, you do competition shooting, whatever it is, it's a tool. You know, if you're building a house, you could use a hammer, but why when you have a nail gun? If you have a nail gun, are you just going to throw away the hammer? Heck no, because you're probably going to need that at some point. So the more tools we give our community to build, the better we are advancing, protecting ourselves, and just when it comes to the laws, pushing laws forth and being able to understand, because we get a lot of politicians who do these snaky, you know, middle of the night kind of deals where they pass one law and then they pass another one, and we're slowly losing rights because we don't understand the gravity of the situation because it's something we're not educated on. So we need to educate ourselves. When it comes to the gangs, Mr. Timmons, he's absolutely right. There's no correlation between guns and gang violence. I can understand what the person is asking. If there's more guns in the streets, say in the hands of criminals, okay, yes, there will be more gun violence because there's more guns on the street. But that also goes back to the federal government dumping guns and crack in the streets. You know, the largest part of that is in order, like you said, to contain a problem is not to blame the firearm, it's to blame the people. Focus on those gangs. Get those gangs off the street. Run them out of the community. You know, and part of running them out of the community is myself and yourself arming ourselves so we can't be victims. When the gangs realize that they can't peddle their drugs, they can't break into our homes, they move elsewhere. So in order to do that, you need to arm yourself and prepare yourself to make sure that those gangs aren't taking over your neighborhood.
I'd like to make a comment.
Now, another question I was, oh yes,
My great uncle, the pictures that you showed were from the Civil War primarily. And during the First World War, my great uncle, he told me a story. He was in France on a troop train and they didn't allow us to carry weapons. Now here you are on the battlefield. They blew up the troop train and he found himself, he had to play dead out on the battlefield and the Germans came by bayoneting people. Can you imagine how frightening it is to have been on a battlefield without a gun? And should I say that here we are still today on a battlefield without a gun? That's my comment. Just a minute. Can't hear you, Dr. Butler.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, wonderful. Unfortunately, when a black man has a gun or a black woman has a gun, we're looked at differently by the police. How do we address some of those issues? And the first thing they do is shoot us. How do we address some of the things and reduce some of that stuff from happening? Sergeant Joe, can you guys hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I'll go. What I think, my response to that is that first of all, it doesn't happen anywhere near as much as some people who would like us to believe happens. It doesn't happen as often as we think. It is a horrible thing when it does happen because I don't think it should ever happen. The case of Philando Castile immediately comes to mind, and I don't think that I'm certain that it shouldn't have happened. But Sergeant Joe probably agree with me that that police officer actually broke all of his training and put himself, as we like to call it, on the X. In other words, he put himself into a dangerous spot, and that is what happened. But you'd be surprised at how often there are encounters with police when people have guns. I've been stopped twice in my car when I've had guns in it when I was on my way either to the range or to somewhere else, because here in Maryland, you simply can't just be armed. And one time I let the officer know that I was armed because I'd found out that my son there was a problem and almost got my car towed, but that's different. But anyway, he had to look through the vehicle because he might have had to tow the car. And I told him, I said, look, I let him know exactly what was going on. And I noticed absolutely, positively no change in his behavior. So I can tell you that it's not always the case, although we really do need to make this much more steady for black people. Because instead of me saying, hey, black people, you don't need to be scared, it should already be in there that we shouldn't have to be scared of our own police in the first place for any reason.
That's right.
Yes. And that is so true. I know we're gonna show another video really quickly. I want to show this video, and then I want to talk a little about this video and how do we actually start getting people to get more gun ownership, and where can we go to start looking to buy guns? Video, please.
Black power.
Black love, black love.
I wanted to show a little clipping of that video because people have been showing little clippings of this video, not knowing the reason why this amazing group of Black men and women were out there marching to, I guess it was Stone Mountain. And I know, Sergeant Joe, you're from Georgia. So I would like for you to comment on more so why that approach was taken. That was such a beautiful scene for me to see, but if you've been listening to some of the media over the last week since that has happened, they've tried to script the narrative that this was a negative movement when I think this was it was a beautiful movement for me. So, Sergeant Joe, could you tell us a little bit more about why they were out there marching, and the importance of us showing that we're in this position?
Okay, with that march, and I'm a big advocate of Second Amendment rights. I believe everyone should be armed. We've had times where you see Caucasians get in groups and they storm buildings and they're armed. And they're patriots and all this. When Black people do it, it becomes a negative connotation to it. That being said, the whole situation that happened in Stone Mountain on July 4th, there's two sides to that. It's a great imagery. It's great for people to feel like, hey, we need to be out here. We have someone fighting for us. On the flip side of it, there's a lot of cons to that situation. As a military person who's involved in a lot of things over my lifetime, whether it's private security and private protection, those types of things in my military background, when I see those types of videos, I'm keen on very specific things, like their muzzle awareness, the type of firearms they're carrying, their attire, how they march and they carry themselves. If you're not military, you may not pick up on these things. I immediately got a phone call from a friend of mine who's in an agency, and he's like, have you seen this? And I'll point it out, but you have guys who are walking around with vests on that they just bought with no body armor. You've got guys walking around with 22 caliber rifles, which you might as well throw a handful of rocks. You've got people walking around pointing their rifle at each other. And for those who don't know, they didn't cover this on the media, they had an accidental discharge where someone shot into the ground and their gun was taken from them. It's great to have a firearm. It's great to get out and show a force and realize, hey, these are our rights. But what you don't want to do is put a false narrative out there that, hey, I'm ready for war. Hey, I'm ready to battle. When you're not. When we get firearms, we need to train. A lot of incidents happen, bad shootings happen when you have people with firearms that they don't train. Anyone can buy a gun. That doesn't mean anyone should go out in the street and be a cop. Doesn't mean anybody should go out and be a militia or a vigilante or whatever. It takes training. That entire situation in Stone Mountain was great for appearances, but on the back end of it, you have to consider the repercussions for it. You have a whole group of people marching to Stone Mountain. Okay, well, we know that there's bad actors. We know that there's people behind the scenes, whether they're law enforcement or not, who are out to do harm. My first question was, did anybody protect their vehicles? Are police looking up their license plates and getting their home addresses? Did anybody stop to consider that there's children in that crowd that are unarmed? What happens if someone pulls up and there's a confrontation? There's a lot of things that went on with that situation, and I'm not going to say I'm for or against it simply because there's so many things that went right and so many things that went wrong. There's a whole lot more to that story, and I don't want to dive into because we'll be on this thing all day. There's a whole lot more. The leader, Jay Johnson, I've known him since 2013. We've got a background. We've got a history. And I don't like to tear anyone down. I don't like to jump on a soapbox about these things. But I'll leave you with this point on here. The KKK every year has a mass rally on the 4th of July. It happens every year. Last year, I believe it was in Virginia. This year was Gettysburg for the 4th of July. My biggest issue with this protest is if you knew, and it was on the news for over a week, Antifa made a threat to tear down Confederate soldier cemetery headstones. So KKK responds that they'll be there. This was known. So why would an organization plan a rally at Stone Mountain, the home of the KKK, if they're not going to be there? To me, that's a lot of showboating. If you want to go toe-to-toe with these guys, show up at their rally. I'm all for standing next to somebody and fighting. You want to go toe-to-toe with these Nazis and whatever else? Let's go to town. I've got a whole squad that I can call up in a heartbeat. But what I won't do is endanger other people's lives. And put people out there with firearms that don't have any type of training, because now they're more of a liability. And I don't want to see my brothers and sisters gunned down the street by some crazy guys out here, with their machine guns. Because let's be honest, white people get a lot of training. There's guys out here who got some crazy guns that I know, and they do a whole lot of training. We're just in the beginning stages of getting to that. We don't want to start biting off more than we can chew. But definitely arm yourselves, exercise your rights, and don't back down.
Mr. Timmons, do you have any?
Yes, I actually wanted to thank Sergeant Joe for that great exposition, because he's totally right, and he probably doesn't want to toot his own horn, but I'll say it. You should get training. Just because you own a car doesn't mean that you're a driver. Just because you own a firearm doesn't mean that you're proficient with it. And I fully echo what he was saying in the fact that we do need to be trained with the effective use of firearms. And I won't just say safe, because in my opinion, that's just giving code words to those who would be anti-gunners. If you're responsible and effective with your firearm, you're going to be safe by the very definition of it. And Sarge, I'm happy to see that, because I thought I was the only one that was looking at the fact they were covering each other's with muzzles, and there wasn't as good trigger discipline as there should have been. But I also am, one slight point of difference that I might have with Sarge is that after some training that I received, one of the things that I really came through with, and this was called force-on-force training, Sergeant Joe knows what I mean, is that I really want to do everything I morally can in my power to avoid an armed conflict. Because, every bullet has an army of lawyers behind it. And you're morally responsible for what happens with every time you pull that trigger. And that is something that many of us need to know. I think a lot of us bought guns out of fear. And while we may have bought them out of fear, that doesn't mean that we should act out of fear. We should act out of confidence. Thanks.
Dr. Butler.
Can I respond to him with that?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yes, please.
Yes, I absolutely agree with what he said. I absolutely agree. A deadly weapon is your absolute last line of defense. Absolute last line of defense. The comment that I made about if they want to go toe-to-toe, this isn't the Civil War. We're not going to have the white supremacists line up on one side of the field and our team line up on the other side, and we're going to meet in the middle. It's unlikely. Ideally, that would be great. If that's how we can get rid of racism, I'm all for it. If you want to go toe-to-toe, I'm all for it. If there's white supremacists out here threatening people, I'm all for it. But what we can't allow people to do is to grab guns and go around making threats. My largest problem with that protest is the leader, J. Fitzgerald Johnson, was stopping vehicles of white people and questioning, where's my reparations? He's on video literally telling someone to, get out of here before you lose your life. I hear him on video saying, if someone approaches you and they threaten you, kill them. Your firearm should be the absolute last line of defense. Verbal judo is number one. Hand-to-hand control combat is number two. Distance is your friend. If I feel like someone's a threat, I'm not going to be walking towards them. I'm going to create distance because I have a better advantage if you're trained. What I'm not going to do is go walk into someone's house with a firearm and call them out. Because, again, that's your last line of defense. You can be considered a brandishing a weapon, which is a felony. If you grab a firearm and you go out and you start making threats, you're brandishing a firearm. Again, I'm all for 2A, especially with black people. That's all I do is train as many people as I possibly can. But what we can't do is go around threatening and calling out people. They called out rednecks. People don't even know the history of the word redneck. People don't even know that there's a ton of great rednecks. My best friend, he's from Texas. Big, 6 foot tall, goofy redneck. Coolest guy you'll ever meet. He's calling out Boogaloo boys who've been fighting for Black Lives Matter at most of the protests that I've seen. And everybody has their different takes on different groups. But what we don't want to do is say, hey, white people, and put them in a box and make them a threat, because you have some people who are on that fence. It's just like being over in Iraq and Afghanistan. We have people that are on the fence. And if you go in there too hard, you push them to the other side. Now you've made an enemy. And that's what we don't want to do. Like, as I said, that whole protest up there, Stone Mountain, was great for imagery. But when it comes down to the meat and potatoes of the situation of getting where we need to go, it could have been done better.
What I wanted to say was I contacted the American Nazi Party. I contacted the National Organization for the KKK to try to get somebody to speak, and they didn't respond. So that's quite interesting. And I agree 100%. I practice Islam, and your main defense is your mind. We don't carry weapons of any kind.
Absolutely. And with that being said, people also have to look at history. History repeats itself.
Yes, sir.
When Martin Luther King and Malcolm X marched, people didn't bother to look at the aftermath. Every time that there was a march or a protest or a sit-in, there was some sort of backlash in the next coming days from the white supremacist side.
Yes, sir.
A march would happen, and then black girls would get raped or killed. A march would happen, someone would get burned alive or hung from a tree. When you have these type of things that happen in today's society, you can guarantee there's backlash. They're identifying people, they're getting addresses, they're figuring out where you work. They're doing everything that they used to do back then, but they're behind a curtain.
Yes.
You step out in that forefront, you have to understand you've just painted an X on your chest, and you've got to be prepared for that. But you also have to understand that you're endangering the people around you, the people you love, you care about, the people that you work for, because you painted a target for yourselves. So you have to consider these things when you step out of that curtain out into the forefront. Realize that there's people around you that are working for the other side, that are behind that curtain, and they're going to do you harm.
Yes,
so we play the game like the white supremacists do, blend into society.
Yep.
You know, you might walk past a person who's KKK and not even know it.
That's right.
So who you are, they're watching you. I like to be in the background. I like to be quiet. I like to be hidden. If I can walk past a guy who's KKK and I don't know it,
yes,
I don't even know who I am. That's our best defense, is blending in with society, not highlighting ourselves, and doing things the right way the inside.
Wonderful, wonderful. Mr. Timmons, do you have any response to that? Because one thing I was going to say, and I wanted to question, how do we move forward with what's happening right now in our country and make a stance? How do we do that? And what are some of the things and tips that you can give for people to stand up for their rights?
Well, first of all, I actually fully agree with what Sergeant Joe said. But just to expand on that, a war is never won on one front. And with his military experience, and thank you for your service, by the way. Thank you very much. Is that you need, to be honest with you, it's not my first instinct to want to be on here, because I'd rather be that gray man, as Sarge was pointing out. But you need some people in the forefront. You need some people behind them. And you need some people that only pop up when absolutely necessary and pop right back down when it's no longer necessary. But I do, what I think is the best way forward is first of all, for us to realize that it is not in our political interest to have those who would infringe upon our rights to be our representatives. I think that's the very first thing. I think it was Tip O'Neill, former Speaker of the House, who said all politics are local. And I think that this is a very great example of it. The massive amount of people who are purchasing firearms for the first time are, in many cases, those who were anti-firearm. And now that they aren't, I would like them to be reflective in their decision. I would like them to actually look at why they changed their mind. I'm not criticizing them for changing their mind. I actually support them changing their mind. But they should look at that. The second thing is that get training. The third thing, get training. That firearm is not a toy. It is not something to develop a feeling of superiority around. because, you know, for every cop that gets shot, there's somebody who's armed who got shot. So having a firearm doesn't necessarily mean much, actually means very little on its own. And I also would like us to reconsider and rethink, why is it that that the gun laws seem to be aimed at us? You know, how can we think that these people who say that they're on our side, who are with us for our development, meanwhile, these are the same people who would disarm us? And, you know, disarming is very rarely a passive thing. It's always an active thing. You know, verbal judo is the act of disarming somebody using your mentality. So I'm just simply not a fan. You know, I don't want to compel people to have firearms. I don't believe in that either. But just as much, I don't think that it should be restricted simply because somebody else may, at least at first, not feel comfortable with me being armed, because their comfort is not my duty.
2 questions, and anybody can answer. Why did Harriet Tubman carry her gun, and why do we see so many young people having access to guns today?
You want to take that one, Sarge?
Yes, absolutely. With Harriet Tubman, she understood that in that time frame that there was no calling the police. You know, nowadays, someone breaks into your house, you call the police. Whether it takes them 5 minutes or an hour to get there, they'll show up eventually. Harriet Tubman there was no calling the police. There was no cell phone. There was no, you know, hey, here comes the gang of white boys in the truck coming to kill me. There was none of that. It was my life or their life. In today's society, there's more options. There's better understanding of situations, and there's more support systems. As a community, we have to band together. We have to recognize, you know, the people in the community that are strong. I've got people in my neighborhood here who will call me if they have a problem.
Yes, sir.
A couple weeks ago, I have elderly black ladies who live in my neighborhood. Her alarm went off. She wasn't at home. She called me, called the police. She let them know that I was going over there. I went over and checked, made sure everything was locked up, waited for the police to arrive. Let the police know what was going on, and everything was good. But they knew to contact me. She's not a firearms owner. She lives by herself. She's 82. And to understand that you have that support system in the community, because police can't be everywhere. There's only 500,000 of them in America. You know, in a firefight, in a situation where it's a rape or a murder or whatever it is, split seconds matter. You can't count on the police to come from 20 miles away and get there and save you. You've got to protect yourselves. What was your second question, sir?
Well, let me say something about the first question. This is what I've been told, that she carried the gun for the people who would try to run away. Not so much for the patty rollers and stuff, but because she had to keep control of the people who were in her unit. And as a military person, you understand about if you get outside, you can jeopardize everybody. Absolutely. And the second question is, how can we, and I know it to be true because when I was a teenager, we had access to guns. Earlier, I talked to a friend and I reminded him of a time that we were all together and we had been in a shootout and the police was following us. And we pulled in this lady's driveway and this elderly lady said, "Come on in, nephew." She was peeking out the window. And she told us, "Now I don't know what y'all have done, but you can leave the car here, put the guns in the car and walk home." And that's what we did. So how is it today as an old man, I don't know nowhere where I can get a gun. I mean, I can go to the store, but as a kid, I had access to guns. How are they doing it? Why is it that the policy?
So growing up, and it really depends on the area that you're in.
Yes.
I grew up in Virginia, and then I moved to Atlanta at a really young age. In Virginia, everybody was hunter. My dad's a hunter. When I moved down here, it was, you know, other than the guns my dad had, I didn't see them very often. The inner cities tend to be more gun-free than the urban and rural areas because you get a lot of guys who are hunters, people who live out, 10 miles out by themselves, and they have to defend their property because they understand the mentality of the police can't be there. You've got 500,000 people in a county or in a city, and the police can't be everywhere at once. So we need to adopt that inside of our cities and understand that we are our first line of defense, and we should be our last line of defense, not the police. And like I said, with Harriet Tubman, she was doing that to keep people in line because, again, you can't have someone running off because they're scared or getting lost, and then they get found and they track that person back to us.
Yes, sir.
And it's the same thing with our community today. You have to stick together. You have to work together and get training together. So that way it's on a united front. What you don't want is you have these white supremacists picking off, ones and twos here and there. We've got people who are committing suicide by lynching. I've never seen a black person who's ever walked an hour from the house and hung themselves from a tree. I don't understand that. But they're picking off people one by one. But to that analogy is stay together. Don't go off by yourself. Arm yourself. Train together. Work together. I've got guys who I know I can call in a heartbeat and they can get to me if I need it.
Yes, sir.
In different areas of the city. We've got to work together in order to control the narrative, protect ourselves. And again, when it comes to the police, as Mr. Timmons was saying, there's plenty of cops who die armed. There's plenty of police officers who die with firearms.
Yes, sir.
So that's not grounds for you to say, hey, I'm big and bad and I'm tough and I can do what I want. But that's what we see a lot of in the streets, whether it's police officers or civilians. They get that same thing as with alcohol, that liquid courage. You get that firearm courage and think they're untouchable. Those are the people you have to worry about the most. Those are the people who need psychological evaluations, because that should be your last line of defense. And being aggressive just because you have a firearm, you can end up in a box the same size as the rest of us. But we need to understand that as a community, working together, exercising our rights, and making sure that we do everything legally possible to do these things. So there's no question about it when you have to go to court for shooting someone. There's no question about it when someone breaks into your house and you've got to defend yourself. There's no question about it when you see 5 cops kneeling on top of a black man and he can't breathe, that you had to intervene.
Yes, sir.
So we're at a point in our history. It's a turning point. It's a turning point in our history, and I embrace it fully. I'm absolutely 100% behind it. And if anybody ever needs me, needs my guidance, needs my help, give me a call.
2 things I just want to tack on to what Sergeant Joe said, and it was great points, is that there's a saying that goes, when seconds count, police are only minutes away. And the second thing, good Lord, just fell out of my head, and it had to do with the use of firearms. Oh, yes. Also, the police have no legal duty to any individual at any individual time. There are 3 Supreme Court cases which specifically state that the police duty is solely to the community, not to the members of the community, but to the community. And one of the lawsuits specifically had to do with how long the police took to get to a house that was reporting a break-ins. Somebody was ultimately killed by the person who was breaking into the house, and they sued the municipality for the police not getting there. And I mean, it took them like a couple of hours to get there. And the Supreme Court, in upholding the decision of the lower court, stated that although the police may have been derelict in their duty isn't to any individual at any individual time. So, they say that sometimes there's no justice, there's just us. Mm-hmm. And I feel that really applies to this situation. And also, one of the things that happened was that when I became a more energetic gun owner, it forced me to examine my entire philosophy of life. And I'm glad that I did, because it made me a much more responsible person. I was going to say man, but women can have them. Of course, I actually believe that it's slightly more important for women to have guns, because I'm 6'3", I weigh about 290, and I'm not in that good of shape. There's maybe 1% of the female population that even has a chance to fight me off martially.
Yes, sir.
So that firearm is a great equalizer if utilized properly.
Well, what you said about the woman, I want to turn it to Dr. Butler. Go ahead. We need to talk about women. I want
to definitely get to them talking about
yes.
How can we safely own a gun, and where can we go? Because this show is from, say American Africans United. So where can we go to support other Black gun shops in our areas? If you guys know in the Atlanta area, in the Maryland area, because we have people from across the country. But how can we find out in our local areas where we can go to find and support Black-owned gunneries, to buy firearms, and also to learn to shoot and learn all about the guns? Where can we go in our local community? Or how do we find out?
A great resource for that is NAAGA.com, NAAGA.com. The National African American Gun Association. They have chapters all over. They're about 50,000 strong now. Again, that's NAAGA.com. And it has great resources on there. It shows you where you can go to Black gun-owned shops in your specific state. You can go to gun ranges in those areas. There's trainers in those areas. That's a great resource to look up. You can also go to blackownednews.com, and they also have some information. But you can actually just Google it. You can say Black-owned gun ranges, and it'll give you a list. Absolutely support your community. Go out and learn and educate yourselves. There's veterans in every state. If you know a veteran, reach out to them and ask them, because chances are they either own a firearm or know someone who teaches, and they can walk you through these types of things. I teach, I have police departments that come and shoot with me, different officers for different training. Police get very limited training, very, very limited training. So when you have someone who's either got military experience or been in law enforcement for a long time, they can, they know more about the gun than the average person. So even getting that bit of information from a veteran or a seasoned police officer or someone who's, been a hunter for years, they can give you a little bit of information and point you in the right direction for where you need to go. But again, that resource is NAGA.com. They do accept memberships, and they're not just a gun club. They're about building community.
Thank you. And I know that I said we have a few more minutes, and I want everyone to just give me your last thoughts on a Black man with a gun. And because I do think, and it's been very educational. I've gotten a lot of texts and emails. So I can't even ask some of the questions, they're kind of off, but I want to really say, I want to thank you guys. But one thing I want you to talk about just briefly is the fear that how do we overcome the fear? You touched on it a little bit, but how can Black people overcome the fear? Because everyone I've talked to, the majority of them, 50% is like, we shouldn't own a gun. And what percent of Black people actually own guns in this country, if you have those statistics? Legally own guns.
Legally. Actually, there are many Blacks that own guns legally. The way I put it is that, Black people own guns just like white people own guns. It's just that we don't talk about it. And in America, it's not like, they say that there's a gun for every American, but not every American owns guns. The average gun owner owns 8 firearms. But what I would say is that fear can mean two things. It can mean either face everything and realize, or forget everything and run. I think that we should face everything and realize. And I would end with saying, to kind of paraphrase the Bible when it says, "Who told you were naked?" Who told you guns were bad? That's the question I would begin with.
Well said. And absolutely, fear it's grown from a lack of understanding. In order to get past that fear, you have to educate yourself on the gun laws. What we run into a lot is people get in situations where they don't know their laws and they get flustered. They say the wrong thing, and the police are on edge, and it's all these types of things. And I've spoken with local law enforcement. It's about getting our society more involved with the police departments, helping them to understand, hey, we support good police officers. We're armed and we want to protect ourselves. We don't want to get shot for carrying a firearm. But it goes back to knowing the laws, legally arming yourself. And, you can tell the difference between a guy who's just on the street, who's, walking around with his pants around his ankle and he's got a gun, versus someone who's dressed properly, who's got a gun on. As much as we hate to see stereotypes can sometimes be true. So when you carry a firearm in a certain way and you educate yourself, I carry everywhere I go. I've been out in protests in multiple cities carrying my rifles, and police come up and talk to me, and I've never had a problem, but it's the way I carry myself. They can see that I'm professional and I know how to handle myself. But again, that goes back to fear is a fear of the unknown. If you educate yourself and, take the classes, it's going to mitigate a lot of that fear and the interaction that you have with not only police, but other people in the community.
And one last question. What is the average cost to get your license and do the training, get your license, the average cost?
It depends on the county that you're in. You go to your county probate court and they'll give you the price, and you can usually get on the county probate website and look up concealed carry. The average cost for the nation, I believe, is $55, $65. Here in Georgia, it's $75. And again, it varies by county. Absolutely. Even if you don't plan on buying a gun, go apply for your concealed carry license. Because what we're seeing in this pandemic is everyone wants to panic and go buy a gun. Well, if you have a license, that shortens that time period that you have to wait. Okay, so if you have your license already, you're already ahead of the curve. Once you buy a firearm, you can legally carry. You don't have to wait for your license in the mail. And then, in times like this, worry about someone doing some harm to you while you're out and about. Definitely get training and get out ahead of the power curve.
My only comment is we're out of time. And Dr. Butler, when she brought up the subject, I didn't know it would be done so tastefully. So thank you, Dr. Butler.
Oh, I want to thank our guest today. This has been very informative. And I think that I'm hoping that people, especially Black people, will wake up and understand that having a gun is nothing to fear. And understanding and knowing how to use a gun is the most important thing. And like Mr. Timmons has always told me, that it's just another tool. And we have tools around our house everywhere to do a certain job. And so we also need to have a tool that's called a gun and realize that it is a tool, but know how to use that tool before you pick it up. So I wanted today I want to thank my guests. I want to thank Sergeant Joseph, AKA Sergeant Joe. And I want to thank also David Timmons, and for sure thank my co-host, the Invisible Man. And Afrique Today, I want to every hour on Friday. We'll be here with you every Friday at 7 o'clock. Next Friday, please don't miss it. We're going to be again talking about reparations. And I know some of the people who were on the call last week, we didn't get around to talking about what Ghana has to offer people of African descent. And so we're going to expand that, and we're going to talk about it with the next month. So look out for that. We're going to talk about what the continent, and we're going to have at least 2 to 3 ambassadors from various countries online with us to talk about what the continent has for African Americans. And so do stay tuned, look forward, and I want to thank my guests again and my co-host and Afrique Today. Thank you. From American Africans United, we will see you next Friday.
All right.
Do you want to promote your business? Do you want to talk about your nonprofit organization? Do you want to talk about your culture? Introducing the online web TV, Afrique Today. Fogham, where you can watch us live at the same time on 4 platforms: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and using the Afrique Today app. Download our app today for Android or Apple. Promote your business today. For more information, go to www.afriquetoday.com. Afrique Today, the best of digital TV. ESYDA returned to play summer clinics. Recreation, Tuesday and Thursday, 6 to 8 p.m. Travel team, EDP, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday. Time, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Free mask and water bottle. Register today at esYDA.org. Email info@ESYDA. Phone 248-765-9369. Office 301-800-7848. Toll free 800-995-5532. Free registration for all summer clinics. All new players need buy uniforms. We're following COVID-19 soccer guidelines. Small group practice with 9 players and 1 coach. For more information, go to esYDA.org.
Looking to start a rewarding career? Call Gandhi Healthcare today to earn your certification as a nursing assistant, dental assistant, pharmacy technician, phlebotomy technician, and many more. We offer no interest payment plans, scholarships, and tuition reimbursements for those that qualify. Located right in the heart of Pikesville on Reichstown Road and McHenry Avenue in the Pikesville Shopping Center. It offers immediate access from 695 accessible to public transportation on the 83 and 89 bus line. We offer morning, evening, and weekend classes to fit your schedule. Earn your certification in as little as 5 weeks. We are now offering classes online and on-site. Hurry, classes start soon, so enroll today. Visit us online at gandhihealthcare.com or call 443-352-8030.
We're inviting you to watch a special program that will be broadcasted on Afrique Today, the digital Pan-African television of choice of the diaspora. Is based here in Washington, D.C. in the United States of America. That special program will be on coronavirus, COVID-19, that vicious pandemic that is killing hundreds and thousands of people, messing up their lives all around the world, millions of people. We'll be talking about that. What is going on in Cameroon, especially in those rural areas where people have limited means. People are dying. What about the mask? What about chloroquine? What about all the medication, the traditional medication? What about the vaccine? We'll be talking about all that. And to talk about that, we have put together a panel of international experts. They're going to be calling from Japan, from China, from Europe, and from Cameroon. That program is sponsored by the Pacha Foundation. And to watch that program, you will be able to connect on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, and on the website of Afrique Today, www.afriquetoday.com. Next Saturday, July the 11th, 3 p.m. Washington DC time. It will be 8 p.m. in Yaoundé, Central Africa. We will be there. I am Dr. Semyon Dogmo. I will be the moderator. You will learn a lot. See you there. Afrique Today.
Do you want to promote your business? Do you want to talk about your nonprofit organization? Do you want to talk about your culture? Introducing the online web TV, Afrique Today. Fogham, where you can watch us live at the same time on 4 platforms: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and using the Afrique Today app. Download our app today for Android or Apple. Promote your business today. For more information, go to www.afriquetoday.com. Afrique Today, the best of digital TV.